Welcome back to the SENWA studio out here at Optus Stadium. It's a wet day in Perth today. Going to be a maximum temperature of 26 degrees later in the day. Chance of a thunderstorm as well, and we've already heard a bit of thunder around at the moment. There was a bit of thunder among Fremantle fans after a 10-point loss against Melbourne at the MCG on Saturday. Joining us to talk about that and the massive game ahead against Adelaide on Anzac evening is the Dockers Executive General Manager of Footy, Joe Brierty. Joe, welcome to the show.
G'day, Duff. Thanks for having me, mate.
A bit of breaking news, a big event and a big commemoration to come out of the Len Hall game, of course, which is a great initiative that the Fremantle Dockers have run over the course of their history. There's going to be a medal awarded to the best player on the ground. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a really significant game and it's not lost on our playing group. Obviously, game 28th time we played and named after the Len Hall, who's the last surviving veteran of World War One, and obviously this year will be the first time with a medal being awarded for the best on ground, which will actually be named after Arthur Leggett. Arthur Leggett was the last surviving West Australian of World War Two and passed away in April, sadly, at the age of 106. And he's actually recited the ode. I'm sure he's known to many Fremantle fans and Western Australians. So a very special legacy for the club to pay tribute to the Leggett family, and obviously we still acknowledge the legacy of the Hall family. It was great. Tracy Hall, who's Len Hall's grandson, came and spoke to the playing group yesterday, and this year we'll actually have a commemorative jumper, which will pay homage to Len's family and his relationship with his wife Eunice.
It sounded like the player group got a bit fired up yesterday. The training was pretty spirited, I believe. A bit of a scuffle between Pat Voss and Matt Johnson, and some harsh words from Justin Longmuir. Although you'd think Pat Voss could have a fight with himself if there was no one else around. But tell us how rugged training got, and was Justin looking for a bit of urgency and a bit of vigour?
Oh, I don't think it's just JL. I think as a football program and player group, look, the weekend was really frustrating and disappointing, to be honest, and we think that those types of games are behind us. But when we're not valuing the right things, you and I have talked about it earlier in the year, and we go away from contests and our team defence and physicality, it was fairly clear. Our ball movement will take care of itself and scoring close to 100 points each week, but in this competition, if you can't get your team defence and contest right against good teams, we forget the calibre of some of those players around the contest and inside. For Melbourne, when you look at Gawn and Pickett obviously around the ball, and Petrarca and Oliver, you can get found out pretty quickly. So we've obviously had a really strong review and looked at all aspects of the game and where we need to get back to, and looking forward to a strong response from the group going into this weekend against Adelaide.
Something that Hayden Young said in his interview on Monday, I think it was, Joe, and it's bothered me ever since. He said that the group was comfortable, and I'm just trying to come to terms with how a group that has missed finals in the last two seasons when they were expected to play finals, retrieved a shaky start to the season, got themselves to 3-2, and go into that game against Melbourne as a favourite, even though it was a danger game because Melbourne were clearly going to die in the ditch given they were 0-5 over the outcome. But how could the player group have been comfortable going into that game, and has that been addressed with the player group since the game?
Yeah, look, you can use different words. I've talked about it earlier. I think valuing the right things is probably the clearer part. And when you look at being comfortable, you can get caught in offence, and I guess you're not really working together as a unit around the ball. And I think that's probably the key aspect from our point of view. We really focused going into the game, wanting to get a forward half game, and I think Melbourne's ability to get the ball, rebound 50 and transfer it the length of the ground at different times, and obviously Bowie had a fair impact on that. That's, again, just not how we want to play. I think that's what we talked about at the start. We feel like those types of games where our playing group probably go away from valuing the right things, that's where we need to mature and go to another level. And really honest feedback with players talking about different roles within the team that on the weekend we just didn't get right. So when you have a weight of numbers that go away from that on the weekend, in this competition, the way it's been played at the moment, you get found out pretty quickly, and we're seeing that across the competition, even obviously Richmond on the weekend against Gold Coast. So I think that from our point of view, it's a weight of numbers approach and valuing what we think is our DNA. And as I said earlier, that comes back to our team defence and contests, and our ball movement will take care of itself. We know it's a talented group, but we really need to make sure that the cohesion and the focus on what the team needs is a priority.
Yeah, I'm okay with your ball movement. I think it's okay as long as you have that gear, that quick gear that you can go to. It doesn't have to be in action all the time. Are the players a bit caught up in that, where a lot of people are saying, oh, Freo's ball movement is so slow, the best teams are moving the ball quicker. Are they sacrificing defence to try and get the ball shifted a little bit too much, do you think?
No, not really. It seems to happen, I guess, seamlessly at times. I think the way in which we set up the ground, and there's obviously opportunities and different options that our players can take, and I think the confidence in their ability to move the ball is continuing to grow, but at times it really needs to be the harder part of the game when you really need to turn your guts up and look to focus on that physicality that I talked about, and ultimately the unrewarded running is the priority in terms of making sure that we can stop those exits from D50 or get repeat stoppages in our forward half. So I think they're the two main things that we look to really focus on and prioritise, and our players really do value when we're playing good footy, and I think was something that we really got on top of over that 3-week period that we talked about. And I think that, as I said, in this competition, as soon as you look to lean away from that a little bit against opposition where they can obviously take control of the game, momentum, and Melbourne were able to score somewhere in the vicinity of 60 to 70 points, probably 5 minutes into the first quarter and then 10 minutes into the second. So in a quarter of footy to have 10 plus goals scored, it's pretty hard to come back from that. And look, there's also a credit to the playing group that they're able to stay in the game in that situation and give ourselves an opportunity to win the game late. But again, even different moments in the last 5 minutes, which we reviewed, where we just again didn't prioritise that focus on locking the ball in our forward half.
It felt like late in the game too, Max Gawn was able to take the game over. Obviously, Sean Darcy, in fairness to him, had come in off a limited preparation, limited minutes in a waffle game, then limited minutes against Richmond, and then got a rampaging Max Gawn on his plate sort of when the game went on the line, because it felt like when you got within a goal, you were almost the most likely team to win the game. Do you go with some ruck back up for Sean this week, acknowledging that he's still not cherry ripe?
Yeah, we'll talk about that in detail, and I think you're spot on. It was also coming up against the premier ruckman in the competition, so it wasn't ideal timing for Luke Jackson to be out for a couple of weeks, and probably a plan for Luke to do less of the ruck load, and then obviously again Paddy Boss being suspended, but we feel like Oscar can play that role for us, and even a discussion we'll have is whether JT spent some time in the ruck or we've got some options in our back half. Josh Draper spent some time in there against Richmond, so we'll have all of those conversations. Sean will continue to build, and even from Sean's perspective, even though he's had 2 games back, he was pretty disappointed with his game as well, but I think that we'll see a strong response from him, and again, that cohesion within our midfield group and him coming back together will continue to build, and his minutes and his conditioning will continue to get better. I think you alluded to it late in the game. He's fairly fatigued, but also probably a few of our predictability in terms of how we wanted to move the ball late, kicking out of our back half. The fact that Gawn was able to intercept is something that we've looked at and discussed.
Yeah, there was a kick in, I think, by Luke Ryan, where if he'd have gone short, he might have had a player who could have gone and kicked it over Gawn. Instead, it was the long bomb straight down Max Gawn's throat, and he was pretty much dominating every contest he was in by that stage of the game. Quinton Narkle had a big game for Peel at the weekend. Is he close to a call-up?
Definitely, yeah, again, in discussions. He's been continuing to build, Quinton, and he's obviously played a fair bit of AFL footy, and he has a fair bit of flexibility, whether he's playing those high half-forward roles or inside or even on the wing at times. So his composure and ball use has been a highlight, and he's been working on a number of aspects of his game at Peel. He's been building coming back from injury, so he'll be in conversations around selection this week.
So would you be looking for a midfielder to replace Jager O'Meara? Like, would you be looking at someone like Neil Erasmus, or could Quinton Narkle shape as a potential replacement for Jager?
Yeah, obviously with Jager out, he's played different roles as well. He's been on a wing at times, and Matthew Johnson's played a bit of wing for us. We look at, obviously, Chapman was out with illness last week, and Wagner and Neil was the emergency that was held over, and obviously Quinton as well. So the makeup and the mix of that group in terms of how we, I guess, fill that midfield void with Jaeger is something that we'll work through. And Bolton continued to build his load, has spent some time on ball throughout the year, and even Murphy Reid as well. So we feel like we've probably got a fair bit of flexibility that we can spend players through the midfield, but we'll look to lock that away over the next 24 hours before the teams are finalised tomorrow.
We'll have a chat about Murphy Reid because well-deserved Rising Star nomination. But before we get onto that, Adelaide's attack, Fogarty, if he gets over his shoulder injury, Thilthorpe, Walker, Rochelle and Rankin, the players that they can throw at you as well as Keys. It's a pretty potent forward line. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, it's probably a shared load, isn't it? When you look at it, you probably can't really go to one individual because they've all been having their moments throughout games so far this year. And I guess when we look at our key tools in the back half, and in Pearce, Draper and Cox, and even Luke Ryan can play tall, so they'll definitely share the load through those tools. And I think you mentioned Rankin's probably been spending a fair bit of time around the ball this year and been pretty important to them in terms of their ball movement.
Yep.
So that's something we'll talk about as a midfield group. Rochelle will wait and see. He's obviously missed a fair bit of footy, but we know the calibre and the talent of the player, and I think you alluded to it. And Keys is a bit of their heart and soul, and even Neil Bullen moving over from Melbourne's playing some pretty important roles. So, look, our one-on-one contest in particular in our back half is going to be really, really important, but probably a similar theme to what we need to make sure we get right in our brand of footy is if we can actually lock the ball in our front half as much as possible is really important to this weekend, and not give their forwards as many opportunities. But definitely the one-on-one contest in the back half will be an important part of the game.
Looking at your injury report this week, Nathan Fyfe said to be 5 to 7 weeks away after that moderate grade hamstring. Are you taking the long approach with Nathan and just trying to get him right maybe for some footy in the back half of the year? Tell us about the strategy around that, and also Luke Jackson, would he be a definite for next weekend's game?
Yeah, with Nat, it was as a moderate hamstring, you're normally looking at that 4 to 6 week kind of block, and obviously then with his age and the fact that he's had some over his journey, probably adds a week or two on. So I think it sits appropriately with the injury, and as you said, being really meticulous in getting it right. And we think that Nat was fairly close to being available for AFL selection before the injury, and ultimately a few other players kind of came back ahead of him in more managed minutes. But he definitely can have a big impact in the second half of the year and getting him right. So we'll take our time and make sure we're really diligent, and I'm sure Nat will do the same, and look forward to seeing him in the back half of the year. And then you sort of alluded to Luke. He's actually been pushing pretty hard to be available this week, Lukey, so not going to be, but at this point in time, all things look very positive for him being available for the Saints next Friday.
He would have been handy in that last 5 minutes against Maxi Gawn, I think, Joe. It was Sean looked absolutely spent, and obviously Oscar McDonald was doing his best, but was probably a little bit outmatched in the ruck contest. Luke Jackson, his athleticism and his around the ground work would have been pretty valuable for you. Murphy Reid. I mean, some youngsters get a Rising Star nom off the back of one game, but it's really been a body of work across 6 weeks for Murphy, hasn't it? He's been a remarkably consistent young player in the first 6 weeks of his AFL career.
Oh, he's spot on. I think I mentioned that to him yesterday when we announced it in front of the group, that it probably feels like it's not really the one performance on the weekend. He's been fairly consistent as a first-year player coming in, and whether that's his ability to set up his teammates or even hit the scoreboard himself, it's been really pleasing. He's very calm and shows a lot of composure, and he brings his teammates into the game. So it's been a great start to his career, and we'll continue to monitor his load across the year. But I think he's brought a lot to our group, and even from a connection point of view, he's really highly regarded by his teammates.
It's a big game, Joe, and it's certainly a big game in the course of your season. You're at 3-3, which is not disastrous, but maybe one win shy of where you would like to be. And clearly there's a big 6-week block ahead of you that starts with Anzac Day game, the Len Hall game against Adelaide on Friday night. Good luck. We hope you go well, and hopefully we're talking to you in a week or two after a couple of good wins. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Duff. Appreciate your time, mate.
Joe Brierty, he is the Executive General Manager of Footy at the Fremantle Dockers, joins us thanks to Macca's. The Hot Honey range has dropped at Macca's for a limited time only. Embrace the drip with the Hot Honey McCrispy, McSpicy and dipping sauce. We'll be back with more after the break.